Hi, it's Monday again, time for Mentor Monday, but I'm actually filming this on Saturday. So hence my little mascots here, which I'll explain in a second. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lisa Ireland. I'm an Australian author of contemporary fiction, and my latest book is called The Secret Life of Shirley Sullivan, so that's available right now. I'm the author of 6 books so far and another one on the way, hopefully. Okay, so I just want to quickly, before I start today's topic, tell you about my little friend here, which is my little cat. I live in Victoria, Australia, and Victoria has been in lockdown pretty much all winter this year due to the global pandemic. Not all the other Australian states have been, but our state has. And we're a bit of a peculiar state here. We're football crazy. And when I say football, I'm talking about AFL, Australian Rules Football. And so my team, the Geelong Cats, are in the grand final today. And for the first time ever, the grand final is not being held in Victoria. It's being held in one of the northern states in Queensland. Thank you, Queensland, for hosting. And so, yeah, obviously I'm filming this on Saturday. So by the time you watch this on Monday or beyond, the result will be known. And I'm very much hoping that we are walking away the premiers, but who knows, could be the Richmond Tigers, so we'll see. So that's what all this business is about. My house is decorated, so for those of you who follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I'm going to take some photos, I think, a bit later of my house, although it's pouring with rain, so I might not be able to, but I've got decorations happening outside my house, as do lots of other people down here in Victoria, where we're very happy to have 2 Victorian teams in the AFL Grand Final. It's a bit of a bright spot in an otherwise what has been a very bleak winter, and but it's spring now, and hopefully things are looking up. All right, what I want to talk to you about today is writing resources, and I want to share the things that have been useful, particularly to me. Now, there are literally thousands, maybe even millions, I don't know, but there's literally thousands of different books, videos, websites, etc. that you can access to get writing help or writing advice. You're accessing my channel right now to get advice from me. And there's heaps of us out there giving this advice, whether you're paying for it or it's for free. So what I want to do is just tell you what has been helpful for me. These things may not resonate with you. Some of them are old resources, and you might struggle to get your hands on a couple of them, although I think if you look around, you should be able to get most things. There's one that you might struggle with. But as I said, these are all just things that have worked for me. They might not resonate with you. You could give them a go, and if they're not, making your heart sing, if you're not feeling like, yes, this makes sense to me, toss it aside. I've done that with plenty of books. Doesn't mean they were bad books or bad advice. It just wasn't the advice for me. All right, so let's dive in. Let's start off with a couple of tools, like really strong writing tools. These are sort of more along the editing lines. These are everyday resources that you can use to check your writing, or when you are, just when you're struggling with punctuation or grammar. So we'll start with punctuation, which this is my go-to Bible. It's called Eats, Shoots and Leaves by Lynn Truss. Pretty much this covers everything you need to know about punctuation. And if, like me, punctuation is not your strong suit, I would highly recommend investing in a copy of this. I think this is one of the early editions. There's probably been later editions than this, but this is a very popular book. So if you look that one up, Eats, Shoots and Leaves, Lynn Truss. Another one, which is an old classic, and this one's an old edition, but I'm sure there'll be updated editions, but this is pretty much the Grammar, Structure and Style Bible by Strunk and White, so it's called The Elements of Style. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. When I first started, when I was first published, when I first got contracts and started being professionally edited, um, sometimes I didn't always understand the editor's instructions, or I wasn't exactly sure what the editor meant. Not often, but occasionally, I wasn't really sure what the editor might comment on. The way I constructed a sentence, or they might say, I'm just making this up, but say that's a split infinitive, something like that, and I think I don't know what that is, because there's a whole sort of generation of us here in Australia, and I don't know about elsewhere in the world, but when I went to school in the 1970s, I'm very grateful for my very good education. I did have a very good education, but it was sort of in vogue not to explicitly teach grammar and punctuation for a while there. And so what I've learned about grammar and punctuation was through osmosis, through reading. And so I don't always get it right. I'm much better now. All these years of being a published author and working with incredible editors who, I've learnt a lot from my editors. I've had a whole education in the English language from working with some brilliant editors at some brilliant publishing houses. But this, if you are starting out and you're like me, a little bit weak in your grammar and your structure, this is a good little resource to have. Just want a word of caution on grammar and punctuation. I play loose and fast with grammar and punctuation all the time, but the difference is that now I'm breaking rules, but I understand I'm doing it for effect. I understand what the rule is, and I'm choosing to ignore it or subvert it. That's a very different thing to not knowing how to use punctuation or how to, properly construct a sentence or a paragraph. So it's really important to get a good grip on how the language you're writing in. So I'm presuming, because you're listening to me, that you're writing in English. So it's really important to understand the basic functions of the way your language works, the language that you're writing in. So if, like me, you are a bit weak, if you came from a weak background in that, it would be a really good idea to brush up on that, because it's, of course, perfectly okay to break the rules. We do it all the time. I write in sentence fragments. A quick funny story, I had this discussion with my friend and fellow author Kelly Rimmer the other day. She sent me a piece of her writing to comment on, just a paragraph, and we were talking about sentence fragments, and her editor had made a suggestion, and it included a sentence fragment, and Kelly was resistant to making the change because she does not approve, I don't think, of sentence fragments. And then I got a bit worried, because I thought, my books are full of them, absolutely full of them. I do it for effect. When I want to drive home a point, when I'll often repeat a phrase, the end phrase of a sentence, or I'll use just a fragment because I want to really drive that point home. But anyway, I won't tell you what we agreed upon in the end, but just quietly I won. Anyway, so fine to break the rules, but know what you're doing first. So these types of reference books, these are my favourite too. There are many more out there. Find some that work for you, but this would be a good start, in my opinion. Okay, so we're going to move on. So I've got notes today. Look how organised I am. I've got notes because I didn't want to forget anything. So we're going to move on now. Before I move on to the inspiration books, I just want to make reference to a book that I don't have here in front of me that I have used before and I found really, really useful. There's a pair of authors called Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi, and I'm sure many of you would be aware of these books. They started off with the emotion thesaurus, and now they've got a whole bank of these thesaurus. Is that, do we say thesauruses? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to go with that. These ladies have written a whole bank of these books that help you when you're trying to say, you might be wanting to say sad, and but sad doesn't quite cut it. It's an emotion thesaurus. Every emotion your character can feel. And they've got all sorts of these books. Definitely worth looking up. I have personally only used the emotion one, but I know Rachel Johns, Australian author Rachel Johns, is a huge fan of these and uses them in her work. They're definitely worth looking into. And I know at least Angela Ackerman has a strong Facebook presence, so you could go to her Facebook page and have a look and see what you think. So really good extra reference, extra thesaurus. While we're on thesaurus, I also have got, which is on my bookshelf behind me, you mightn't be able to see it, my head's probably in the way. I've got this gigantic old-fashioned thesaurus, a paper one like the old dictionary. I use my computer thesaurus, the built-in one, to Word like about 1 million times a day. But I've also got a big chunky old-fashioned paper thesaurus as well, because sometimes the computer one just doesn't cut it for me. So that's another investment that you might like to make. All right, moving on from tools, moving on to inspiration. And I'm going to give you my absolute top #1 inspirational writing book. It's Stephen King's On Writing. This is my go-to book when I feel a bit low about the writing life, when I feel uninspired or worried that I'm not doing I'm not as far along the path, the career path as I want to be. This is part memoir, part writing advice. If you read no other book on writing, read this one. I love it. That's all I'm going to say about that. One other author, but 2 books. There's an author called Julia Cameron, an American author called Julia Cameron, who was really hugely important as far as inspiration to write, giving myself permission to write when I was first starting out. She's actually got several, but 2 books that apply to writers are The Artist's Way and The Right to Write. I've not read the full thing of The Artist's Way, the full book, because that's sort of more general for creative people in general. So I've sort of dipped into that one a bit, but I read The Right to Write from cover to cover. So if you can get hold of that book, The Right to Write by Julia Cameron, particularly if you're just starting out, or if you're suffering a little bit from imposter syndrome, if you feel like you're not a real writer, that is a great book to get hold of. So now on to specific craft. I've got 2 books that are on my Kindle, so I can't show you, but these are my 2 massive go-to books in terms of when I'm teaching craft. And because when I started out, these were the books that made the most sense to me, and I always recommend these when I do workshops with writers. So the first one is called Goal, Motivation, Conflict, and that's by an author called Deborah Dixon. This is the place to start. If you are a beginning writer and you are looking for some guidance in storytelling and what makes characters tick, how to actually have a full story that makes sense, please go and get Deborah Dixon's Goal, Motivation, Conflict. And you know what? I still use this book. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I actually have a really close writing friend called Delwyn Jenkins, and Delwyn and I were brainstorming some ideas for her book the other day, and I said to her, have you gone back to your goal? She's a very experienced and very successful author, but, all of us struggle at times with books, and sometimes when you get a long way along the path, you forget to go back to basics. And so she was saying, it's not quite right, I don't know what's wrong with it. And then I said to her, have you gone back to your goal, motivation, conflict? And she went, you know what, no, I haven't. No. And she went back and she thought about that, and it fixed her problem for her. And that idea is directly from Deborah Dixon. So she's not just for beginners. That's a brilliant book. That's, I think, a must-have for all writers. Now, another one that's a little bit, I don't even know how I stumbled across this. It's a little bit sort of left field, I guess. It's not, I don't think, as well known a book, but I recommend this book to every writer I come across. It's called Rivet Your Readers with Deep Point of View. I'm going to say that again. Rivet Your Readers with Deep Point of View, and it's by Jill Elizabeth Nelson. This taught me how to write deep point of view. If you're struggling with point of view, this is probably the next level on point of view, but it might help you if you are actually struggling to control point of view, if you don't understand how to keep your characters in one point of view. If you struggle with the control of point of view, this would be a useful resource to you. But it's actually sort of a level above that as well. So for more advanced writers, one of the things that often happens, and it happened to me, which is why I went in search of this book, is when you're first learning to write and maybe you are doing quite well, you're perhaps entering some competitions and getting good feedback, maybe even winning competitions. Your writers group love your work, but you just can't get it over the line with the publisher. And that's where I was at. I was sort of circling in that in that world for quite a few years, where I was almost there, but not quite there. I couldn't just get over that next hurdle. And that, I think, was because my characters didn't have enough emotional resonance. I didn't know how to get the readers so that they were so attached to my characters and so far inside my character's point of view that they couldn't let the characters go. And that's what makes, that's what elevates a book to the next level and what will get you over the line with the publisher. So I knew this from the feedback I was getting. I knew that it was just a nuanced little thing that I needed to tap into. And so I went looking for resources. I found this book, Rivet Your Readers with Deep Point of View. And I don't know why, it just, something in the way she explained it. I'd heard this information many times before, but there's something about the way this particular author explained it. I just went like that, bing, big light bulb moment. And one of the things that one of the comments that I often get from both editors and from readers is that that my characters are deeply relatable, and that I credit Jill Elizabeth Nelson with that because she taught me how to do it. Okay, so a couple of things that really, that's it as far as my really absolute go-to books. I've got a few others. I just want to caution you against any book, and including the ones I've just talked about, that like getting a book and going, this is the way to do it. Yeah, I really generally, although I've got one in this pile, but I generally steer away from the 12 steps to writing a bestseller, because I'm just gonna come out and say it. That's rubbish. There are no 12 steps or 9 or 7 or whatever to becoming a bestseller. If it was that simple, if we could all just read a book called 12 Steps to Being a Bestseller or whatever. I don't actually know if there is a book called that. I'm just making that up. But you know the type of title I'm talking about, where they're guaranteeing you that you will write the perfect novel or you will write a bestseller if you just follow their formula. That's rubbish, because nobody knows what will make a bestseller. Not even the biggest agents and the biggest, most successful publishers in the world still don't know 100% why one book takes off and another one doesn't. They know, they can tell the difference between a really well-written book and one that's got all the elements that probably should explode. But sometimes even books that are really highly anticipated just don't resonate with readers, and others that are just sort of snuck under the radar somehow explode. So what I'm saying is there is no formula. So that doesn't mean that those books don't have any good writing advice to offer. They often do, and probably the title's more about hooking you in to buy it. But I'm just saying, I'm just cautioning you against taking somebody else's writing formula and thinking that's going to be the key to writing a perfect book. Anything, whether it's an editing thing, whether they're saying, here's my color-coded editing system. It's foolproof. This will get you across the line and elevate your writing. Fine, use some of the, read it, take what resonates with you, what works for you, and make it your own. But don't try and superimpose somebody else's system over the top of your own writing. It's not going to work. So with that in mind, these are books that I've dipped into that have been useful for me. I haven't read them cover to cover, but I have found some gems in there. So How to Write Damn Good Fiction by James M. Frey. So that's worked really well for me. Like I said, I haven't read it cover to cover, but I've just dipped in and used a few of the tips out of that book. So that's one to look out for. I thought I would bring this one up because it's nearly November and it's nearly NaNoWriMo, and this is a really practical guide pretty much to NaNoWriMo. So it's called No Plot, No Problem. It's really this is from Chris Batty, who's the guy who's one of the people that got NaNoWriMo off the ground, I think. It's got some practical tips about how to survive NaNoWriMo when you're writing, or at any period when you need to write a lot of words. It's a good practical handbook for if you've got a deadline coming up and you're going to have to write a lot in the next 6 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks. This is a great guide, but it's also gives you tips on letting go of your internal editor, things like that. So that's a good one. Now this one is the old one that I'm talking about that I don't know if you can still get it, and this is genre specific. So this is for people who are writing romance. It's Kate Walker's 12-point guide to writing romance. It's a very old book, and some of the stuff in it might be old-fashioned now, but I just had a flick through it before I started recording, and honestly, some of the stuff that Kate mentions in here is just as pertinent today as it was when she wrote it in 2004, so yes, it is very old. I don't even know if it's still in print, but you might be able to get it on eBay if you can't get a copy. If your bookstore can't get a copy in for you. This is I'm just going to show you. I'm just going to flip open. It's got, as well as all sorts of, really great craft tips, it's got some actual guides and things like that's a character checklist. I don't use character checklists, but I know a lot of writers do. This was really helpful when I started out and I was looking to write romance. There's lots of tips in here that would be good for even if you're not a romance writer, but it's specifically aimed at that genre and most useful to romance writers. When I first started out, I got hold of that book and I did find it very, very helpful. So if there's any romance writers here, definitely have a look on eBay and see if you can find Kate's book. Or, Google it. I should have checked the availability before I started, but I just grabbed this one off the shelf because I'd forgotten all about it. So, all right, before I go, I'm going to just give you a couple of other suggestions. We've talked about the books, and they're the main ones that have worked for me. There's also obviously a wealth of information on the internet. As I've said to you many times before, check people's credibility. What have they written? If they're advising you, what have they actually written themselves? But I am going to give you one tip of one person, and there's heaps out there. I'm just thinking you could look up Writers Unboxed. That's a great website that's just popped into my head. But there's a woman called Jamie Gold who I find, particularly if you're a romance writer, when I was starting out in romance, I thought, but she's across all genres, but she's particularly pertinent to romance writers. So, but if she's just starting out, Jamie Gold's website her tips are really great. Jane Friedman's another one. I think it's Jane Friedman's blog, but yeah. So, and I also follow Bookends Literary. So that's that's an agency, a literary agency. So I follow Bookends Literary on YouTube. They have some fantastic information about the submission process. So if you're at the stage where you're looking for an agent, and they also talk about things in fiction that they don't like, what will turn them off a manuscript. It's really interesting viewing. So that's another one. And my last tips, of course, I get back to the organisations as resources. And even if you are not a romance writer, but if you write commercial fiction in Australia, the Romance Writers of Australia is a really fantastic professional organisation to belong to. There's also genre specific, well, that is a genre specific ones, but there's other genre specific groups like Sisters in Crime. I don't really know, because I don't write crime, I don't know about that, so I can't personally recommend, but I know friends that write crime speak highly of Sisters in Crime. And of course, there's your state-based writers association. So in Victoria, it's Writers Victoria, which I belong to, and I just want to quickly say, don't think, I thought for many years, I only recently joined Writers Victoria, and I've missed out of years of knowledge from that association, because I kind of felt like I, didn't deserve to belong, that I wasn't, at first I wasn't published, and then I didn't think I was published enough or well enough, or I just didn't think that I was, that I was accomplished enough to belong to Writers Victoria. Turns out, Writers Victoria is for every person. If you've picked up a pen and thought about writing a book, right through to if you're, a winner of the Stella Prize, it's for everyone. And I wish I'd sort of cottoned on to that many years ago, because I've missed out on years and years and years of networking and workshops and fantastic resources. So please investigate your state writers centre, because you'll be welcome, or if you're a writer, you'll be welcome, and they just have the best resources and education, and most of it is very reasonably priced. So reach out to your state writer centre if you're here in Australia. I think that's it from me today. So I'm going to go finish decorating my house. Go Cats! And hopefully next week I'll be able to report in that we are the winners of the premiership. Otherwise, there might not be a video next week. I might still be drowning my sorrows. All right, have a great week, everyone. Bye.